today's live chat, which is coming to you from the United Kingdom. And today, what I'm going to talk about is the Donbass and my experiences there. Now, as always, this is live. I forgot that today's Friday when I normally put up a video. I know the last few days I put up a video every single day, but I do try to keep it for my sort of my non-live, my sort of already done videos on a Friday. And unfortunately, I forgot because of the season. I mean, most days do seem the same to me in any case. Anyway, I'm trying to find a suitable position as well to actually sit in. I'll sit on the floor. That might be the best place to actually. Oh, that's all right, isn't it? The light seems okay now. So, as always with the live chat, I'd ask you to you can ask anything you want, of course, but I'd ask you to keep the language relatively suitable for the occasion. Now, last month, I went to Ukraine, and here's a little bit of the story about what happened. My first day, I actually uploaded something about I did a live there from Lviv, and or just outside Lviv, and explaining what had happened during the day. Then I had the idea to do things on a regular basis, but to be quite honest, it's not entirely. It wasn't really a practical it wasn't possible. The point of actually going there was part of a humanitarian mission. These is a organization which is based in Lublin in Poland, and they've been doing lots of trips to Ukraine. In fact, actually, I met them in Ukraine first time in April, and when they were I actually went to I met them actually in Poland. I went from Ukraine to actually pick stuff up, which was it held in Lublin, and then that's how I meant it. John's asked me to address Putin's motivation. Well, I'll try and remember that to do that one. So in my case, so in this trip we went from Lublin to Lviv. There were some adventures at the border, which I sort of explained in my last visit, with all sorts of problems there, trying to resolve issues during the customs importations. Then we went to Lviv. From Lviv, then we drove in a snowstorm to Kiev. And if I was going to take the most frightening part of the entire journey, it was that driving in the snow. I do not like driving in snow and ice at all. Unfortunately, I didn't have to do it. From Kiev, it was -7, and from there we went to Kharkiv. And now the roads in Ukraine do vary. I mean, in some cases, actually, some of the dual carriageways are actually quite good. There is there's 2 lanes in both ways with an emergency breakdown in some places, but in other places the roads are horrendous. And this isn't a war damage; this is weather damage. And although I'd have to say that even the roads, even in the west of Ukraine, very close to the Polish border, there's one which is really good, but some they're absolutely horrendous. I mean, there's no way I would even take my bicycle down them. But anyway, so we drove from Kiev to Kharkiv. So that's like from the biggest city to the second biggest city, or if you were around 35 years ago, it was the 3rd largest city in the Soviet Union to the 4th largest city in the Soviet Union. And so this road via Poltava, it was relatively, I would have to say it was relatively easy. I mean, the weather, of course, wasn't on our side. And stopped in Kharkiv, and then we went from there to the Donbass. Now the idea was to go to Liman. So there was in September there was the Battle of Liman, which got quite a lot of publicity. Around 5,000 Russians were taken prisoner of war there. They were encircled and then destroyed. Liman itself was captured on the 28th of May of this year, 2022, and it was captured as part of the Donbass offensive that was launched in after the pullout from around Kiev. So when the Putinists failed to capture Kiev, they pulled the troops out, and then they concentrated once more in the region of the Donbass, and that actually saw some advances. Now, in September, there was the Ukrainian counter-offensive, and this liberated very large areas of the Kharkiv Oblast. And so we traveled into these liberated areas. Now, Kharkiv itself, if you look at a map, you'll see it's only about 50 kilometers from Belgorod in Russia. I was in Belgorod in 2005. And I remember being in the railway station at the time, and I was thinking how close I am to the Ukrainian border, and I could have just got on a train and then gone over the border. I mean, in Russia it was very difficult to buy railway tickets. Anyway, that's another story. But part of this offensive had been to Kharkiv had been under artillery bombardment, and so part of this offensive was to push the enemy further out. Now, as we went into the areas which are on the Oskil River, and there some of these towns in fact had been captured in the very beginning of the war. So there was a place like Kupiansk, which had been captured, if I remember rightly, it was the 28th of February of this year. And now, but what we saw is from Kharkiv, which is clearly a city at war. I mean, lots of sandbags are up, and there's things which are windows are protected. You know, there's no the blackout at night. It's more blackout at night because there isn't any electricity, but not because of you get an utter war feeling, which you don't so much get in Kiev. But as you drive out and you become this damage which has started, and you see this wanton trail of destruction and roads which are absolutely horrendous. Now, I've posted 3 videos showing roads, 2 from the Donbass, 1 from the Donbass and 2 from southern Ukraine. And I didn't pick bad roads or anything like that. This is quite typical of many of the roads. Now, clearly the war has made things worse, because what's happened as a result of the war is that there were bridges which people would normally have used, and they've been knocked out, so people have to use these secondary or tertiary or whatever roads, these emergency roads and tracks, and that is what has happened. And in some places, these roads are really, they're ruts in the ground. There's places where water would be coming down. And these are the conditions which people there have to live in. So it's for somebody like myself, and my normal day-to-day job is based on automotive sector in motorhomes, camper vans, and there are roads. So I have driven 4x4 vehicles, and but I'm driving new Mercedes, new Fords, new Fiats, and things of this nature. And there are people out there using larders which are 35 years old in these conditions. And so I think that what this has done, it's made some really expert drivers of some of the people who are out there. So as you go to Kupiansk, and then we got across the Oskil River, and then but the devastation absolutely everywhere, swaths of devastation. And not only that, you go through what had been largish towns, so 10 to 12, 15,000 people, hello Christopher, and living there, and the numbers are really down to very small. There's one place, the name of which I've forgotten again. Doesn't matter, I forgot. But anyway, so before the war, I think it was 16,000 people living there, and when World Central Kitchen was handing out food for 150 people. So that to see something like that is it's quite shocking, really. You've got these big socialist blocks. Now, this town was built around, I believe it was around a mine, and there was some industry beside it. So these socialist era blocks were built in the 60s and the 70s, and now because of this war they are largely empty, these ghost towns, and there is ghost villages as well where there's next to nobody living. Now, one of the things is young people who had the opportunity got out, but the older people didn't. I asked people why they didn't leave, and they said things like, well, you didn't. First of all, they said, where would they go? They didn't think it would be all that bad. Some people thought differently afterwards, but at the time they thought, well, they lived in the Soviet Union, and maybe it hadn't been that bad with hindsight, and or the advance had been so quick of the Russians anyway. In fact, I would have to say, in my opinion, the advance nowhere was particularly quick, because we're here talking about it's taken them 4 days to get to a places which are 60 or 70 kilometers from the border. An advance of 15 kilometers against an enemy which is not prepared is not particularly quick, in my opinion. Anyway, you did see very particularly fast advances in the south as well from the Russians. But clearly, the thing is, this is what's happened, is that when there was a little bit of resistance, it could only be a small group of Ukrainians. But bear in mind, if they had things like weapons such as the javelins or similar, they knock out a couple of Russian armored vehicles, and then there's panic. And then the Russians don't know what's happening, don't know where they're going. Bear in mind that the people who were in these vehicles, the Russian soldiers, they didn't know they were invading Ukraine. So this itself created added to this panic. Now, one thing that the Russian form of warfare devised, I would have to say, probably as a result of the Second Chechen War, is just to bombard everything and destroy everything. Now, previously in the Second World War, there had been this the doctrine which was used also by Nazi Germany to a certain extent as well as communist Russia, and sorry, I'll come to the comment. I haven't got a brain that can. I can't think of two things at the same time. Completely put me off my train of thought. The comment. Sorry. It doesn't matter. I'll come back to that one when I remember it. Oh dear. I should really come up with a pile of notes when I get an amusing comment. Then I don't actually stumble. Okay, right. So when the Russians faced resistance, then the policy of the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany, it was to, if they thought they were going to own something, they didn't want to destroy it. Whereas in the Western Allies, for example, in the Second World War, it was to be cautious, but they would actually blow something up beforehand and then advance, trying to save lives. Monte Cassino being a very prime example that men matter more than monasteries. Whereas on the other side, if it had been the other way around, then they possibly would have said that monasteries matter more than men. There's an argument whether it was a good idea blowing up. We won't go into that right now. But certainly in the First Chechen War, you had a situation where the Russians would advance into a town, and then they'd get ambushed from all sides. Whereas by the time of the Second Chechen War, the idea was just to destroy everything, just leave a pile of ruins. So you've seen probably pictures of Grozny as it looked in 2000 or 1999, absolutely and completely destroyed. And this is something that you do see throughout Ukraine. For example, in the Donbass, it's not so obvious, but as it was in southern Ukraine, you could see that the shelling had come from the south, that's to say from the Russian side, whereas the shelling from the north, from the Ukrainian side, is much less, and clearly it's more it's directed at a certain target. I do appreciate, of course, that the Ukrainians probably have better artillery now, although there's not a great deal of it now. So I think this puts the lie to the claim that the Ukrainians were bombarding the Donbass for 8 years. I mean, maybe, I don't doubt that they were returning fire, but there's clearly no policy within Ukraine to destroy everything. And why should they? Because it's only have to be rebuilt again. Whereas, as far as Russia's concerned, the objective is to exterminate the population of Ukraine, either A, by killing them, or B, by forcing them to leave. So anyway, another thing I have to say is on foreign equipment. There's the amount of foreign equipment I've actually seen has been very, very limited. Now, I personally can't tell the difference between a Russian piece of equipment and a Ukrainian piece of equipment unless it's got markings on it. And so, for example, the Ukrainian army's got lots of T-55s and T-62s. T-55s, yes, I said T. That's from the 50s. T-62 came from 1962. I've seen a number of them. Now, the T-62 was also manufactured in Kharkiv, in the tank factory there. So a lot of them could be from those days, but in any case, they're all Soviet stocks. And so whether or not they were captured or not, that I don't know, and I can't tell the T-72 where it comes from, for example. But the amount of foreign equipment has been really very, very small. Now, obviously, I'm not doing searching for this stuff, but I've seen 3 what appeared to me to be Humvees, so that's supposing that they came from the United States, and what appeared to me, I mean, I didn't mean, and one. I saw one M777 howitzer, and so that's it. So the equipment is largely coming from, as far as I can see, it's captured mainly, and that I think that what this shows is that whereas this equipment that's coming is getting a lot of publicity, but as a number of people have already pointed out, the amount of equipment that was sent to places like Iraq and Afghanistan was far greater than what has been sent to Ukraine. Of course, Ukraine's extremely grateful, and I'd have to say myself also, particularly to the United States, for the assistance which has been given. And I'm sure the United States has also given a lot of assistance behind the scenes as well. Now we travelled to Liman. Now, if you looked at it on the map, it doesn't look as though it is very far. But the thing is this, it's because of the amount of bridges which are down. And so there are signs up, but usually just about at the very end, about 50 meters before you get to the bridge, it says the bridge is down. Then you've got to sort of recalculate the route which one's going to take. And but it's really swathes and swathes of destruction. Another thing which surprised me was in the eastern Kharkiv Oblast was the scenery, which appeared to be very much like heathland. It wasn't sort of the rolling fields of wheat which I had expected. Now, I don't know if this is because of the war and that the farmers weren't working there, or they weren't allowed to work there, or whatever, or they were frightened to work there because of mines and things. That makes sense. Or it's because it's that's normally the way it is. Now, in traveling there, really, one has to be far more careful than normal. So if you need to use the toilet, then you don't nip off into the forest behind a tree, because the place might be mined or something like that. There could be a shell or whatever. It's very Liman, there was warnings all over the place about mines, but one doesn't know. And the Russian word for mine doesn't just mean mine as we understand it, sort of something that blows up when you put your foot on it and it's been placed there deliberately. It could mean unexploded ordnance, so it will blow up when you put your foot on it, or may blow up when you put your foot on it, but it's not designed. It was designed to actually blow up when it hit the ground the first time. In Liman itself, so we got there and it was dark, and so this stopped us out, and it was pouring with rain. It was sheets and sheets of rain. The temperature was about 0, Anyway, so where some local authorities allowed us to stay with them, and which was quite good. No heating, obviously, no electricity, and no water. And this is quite common. The thing is, as far as Le Mans is concerned, it hasn't had these facilities for some time, and certainly they haven't been restored since liberation. And now in other places in Ukraine, there isn't any heating. For example, I was talking to a friend yesterday, and she said, it goes off, it can go off for 21 hours. I noticed this in various places I was in. The longest period without electricity in Kharkiv was when I was there. It was about 18 hours, I think it was, something like that. And obviously, if there's no electricity, then this knocks out everything else, because you can't. The heating comes from what's called a central heating plant, and in these central heating plants, they pump out steam or something like that, and then. But to get the pumps to work, then you need electricity. So they might be burning the coal or whatever they're doing. That doesn't need electricity, but to actually then distribute the heat energy, electricity is needed. And so this is also with things like, somebody's got one comment when I uploaded a photograph, I think it was, and somebody made the comment that it was a fake photograph because if the electricity is down, then the internet doesn't work. Well, the internet doesn't work if there's no power in your telephone and it's from the provider. However, if the provider still does have, then it will work. So that is clearly what's happened. Some of the places I actually went into, what the Ukrainian army often does is very quickly after liberation, it will set up a internet service, and so people can actually log on and contact their families and what have you, tell them they're safe and or whatever. So this is something which happens. So it can find that places do have internet access, but they don't have electricity. And I must say though, when we went to Liman, and then the police sort of said to us to where to actually do distribution, because we had actually done things, we distributed things to people in the streets, and they asked us not to do that. And I suppose when I think about it, I'll come back to that question, Dan. And I can understand, because they had apparently once before, then they were in Izium, there was a problem with distributing in the street, and people were always fighting each other to try and get some of the aid. I mean, we only had 3.5 tons. I mean, it sounds like a lot if it's you've got to carry the stuff, but 3.5 tons of aid doesn't actually go very far, and it might do for one family, but there's all of the huge amounts of people. I also think that I can also see that people might say, well, what's the point of doing this? And to a certain extent, that's true, because 3.5 tons of aid, well, it doesn't, and as I say, it doesn't go very far, and so it'll be eaten. We had one place in Liman, for example, had it all laid out on the grass, it was I was thinking, it's all going to be gone tomorrow. But we did give people other things. We had these blankets. We had this very generous supplier of blankets. There was a pizza company also gave us T-shirts to hand out. Unfortunately, the pizza company had gone bankrupt, but they had their T-shirts. So we're handing out these T-shirts. I don't even know where the blankets came from, but they were very, very, very good quality. I must admit, I would have liked one myself. And we had pillows and these sort of seating things, put in a seat, sort of like the blanket. And that was really good. Sorry, I'll answer some of the questions. I like to add things. Right, so John asked me, what do I think Putin's motivation is? No, the motivation is quite clear. I'll do this in a longer one than this one, because I think this is a very, very good question. The motivation of Putin is clearly it's a land grab. This is the attempt or desire to occupy Ukraine has been something which has gone on for a very long time. This is not something that Putin has just invented. for example, if we take the Holodomor, we can see in the 1930s they were using exactly the same type of language. So saying these Ukrainians are all fascists, now they're calling them Nazis, Nazis, and Putin's Nazis calling Zelensky, who's Jewish, a Nazi. It's totally absurd, but it's the same type of thing. Ukraine, as far as they're concerned, this is something which goes back to the 19th century, is part of Russia by right of some colonialist mentality. But we could say the same is that, if United Kingdom would say with Ireland, and could say, well, Ireland is part of, it's the same people, or something along these lines. They speak the same language, but you've got a very similar type of history. Both having had a famine. Of course, the Irish famine maybe it wasn't so much it was deliberately caused, but it was deliberately, the solution was deliberately avoided. There's a better way of putting it. Whereas in Ukraine, the famine was deliberately caused. It was an act of deliberation. 3.9 million people killed is the normal number, which is accepted, and this was done as a deliberate act. It wasn't an accident. So this is something which has been going on now for a very long time. I mean, we even see in the 19th century, it was the governor of Podolia wrote, I think, get the date right, 1879, he sent a message to the Tsar about not permitting the Ukrainian language to be used, because if they allowed it to be used in schools, then what will happen next? I mean, so people will be using it in the courts, and then they'll be wanting to have independence, etc., or getting that way. So this is not something new. It's something which goes back a very long way, and we've got this Russian encroachment on Ukraine, which has gone on for what, a couple of hundred years. I mean, Catherine the Great, who occupied what is today central Ukraine and Crimea. So this is nothing new. It's Putin's motives are he's trying to put the clock back to a different age. At the same time, the benefits are to steal the property of the Ukrainians. I think that because of the attempt, when we've heard of the genocide, this is something which has come about, I think, as a way of putting them in their place, so to speak. That is what I think the motivation is. Often wars start because of trouble at home. I've heard some people say as well, because Putin had a pile of problems at home, but quite honestly, I don't think he did. He didn't have any problems at home. Putin is quite popular, and I don't think that that this war started as a result of that. So I'll come back to that another time. Christopher says it's 11 degrees today, but cold. Well, here in London, it was around 11, and I was pretty warm. In fact, I was wearing this t-shirt. Well, no, sorry, I had a coat over it. This t-shirt and a coat, and it was quite. I was hot outside. John lives in Tacoma, Washington, a motorhome, and the police are treating me exactly like the Russians are treating Ukrainians. That's what I was laughing at earlier. Right, so Lieutenant Dan says, do I have any contacts with junior ranks Ukrainian army? My question is, why have there been very few issues from them? I personally come from a military background, and we love to moan. Yeah, I haven't heard anybody in the well, sorry, no, I did hear. One complaint. No, there isn't any complaints. The soldiers are really friendly, and particularly when they sort of know a little bit about you. And then I've got some stuff that I will upload one day. I mean, and I have not heard a single Ukrainian complain yet. And a friend of mine asked me yesterday, and she was in Kiev, and she asked me what the army's like. And she asked this question as well. I just haven't heard people are not complaining. I've got to say this though. I mean, the idea is that it's the soldiers' right to complain, but I don't honestly think I complained when I was in. Of course, I mean, it wasn't anything like this, but I don't recall complaining. Yeah, maybe I did about being messed around. I've just forgotten what it was like now all these years. But yeah, certainly I'll bear that in mind for future things. And right, so John asks, can't they get data off their smartphones? can't they get data on their smartphones? No, it's not really a problem. I mean, if soldiers are not permitted to use the internet. I need to point that one out. That's forbidden. And I mean, stuff that I was given via Bluetooth from soldiers. I mean, that stands to reason, though. You can use it. You can actually track somebody with the. I mean, I turned my tracking thing off when I was in Ukraine, but I mean, I don't suppose the Russians wouldn't waste an artillery shell on me. But anyway, that's what I did. Yeah, Ukraine is a sovereign country recognized by the international. And so, David, Merry Christmas, and John has got a 1898 encyclopedia, and the section on Russia is fantastic. 1898 encyclopedia. Yeah, absolutely brilliant. I use, as you may have noticed, for some videos, I use old photographs. I'm just doing one now, a video. I finished writing it about 3 days ago, and I'm just putting it together now. But I found this photograph. He was the person who was part of the Wannsee conference, but his infantry unit, which was founded in 1808, and I found a photograph from 1908. And and so sometimes I'll look for old postcards and things like that, because I think that's the only way I can actually give a flavour of what was happening. And if I can't find old postcards, I'll use modern photographs, but showing old buildings. Okay, so there's my quick talk on the Donbass. I'm sorry, I should have put a video up rather than doing a live broadcast, as it was a Friday, but I messed that one up, forgetting it was a Friday. And so there'll be a video tomorrow on something, can't remember what. And so thanks very much I'll do another broadcast. I'll tell you a bit about where we went from Liman. I'll tell you a little bit about Kherson, for example, what it's like there. And I'll see if I can do some of the live talks before the end of the year. But so for the moment, thanks very much for watching. This is me in London signing out, and thanks for watching. So bye for now.